I'm now honored to introduce another friend who we have on our agenda today as our guest speaker. Dr. Hank Christen was a battalion chief for the Atlanta Fire Department and director of emergency services for Okaloosa County right here for 13 years where I first met him. He also served as a team commander for the Gulf Coast Disaster Medical Assistance Team and responded to 12 national level disasters, including the 2001 World Trade Center attack. Please let me welcome Dr. Hank Christen.
Thank you, Ted. It's an honor to represent a team of 35 medical responders from this area, including Pensacola, that responded to the World Trade Center attack. I'm glad they picked me to stand and speak for them, and I will tell you, I was just a very small cog in a very big wheel. The story starts with a phone call on September 12th. My cell phone rang, and we were notified by the National Disaster Medical System that we would be deploying to the World Trade Center. So that's where it began. Our team, as Ted had mentioned, had experienced many national level disasters, including Hurricane Andrew, which was, I grew up in South Miami, so it kind of rang home. But it was a group of physicians, paramedics, technologists, medical techs, firefighters, and law enforcement officers. And I would add that we even had members from the Mobile Fire Department. So the point is, throughout the Panhandle, that was our experience. I will never forget, as we were flying into LaGuardia and looked down, we came up the North River approach, and down below us was the World Trade Center, or what used to be. And it was a large cavern, just like almost an open cave of dirt among the high-rise buildings of Lower Manhattan. And I'll never forget that view. We worked night shifts and day shifts, and it always amazed me that we stayed up in Midtown, and we had pretty good accommodations, but everybody was like zombies. They couldn't believe what had happened. And as you ride the bus down into Lower Manhattan, we got past the security checkpoints, and then Lower Manhattan was black, except right down at the tip of Manhattan was, of course, the event, the pile, as we called it, with floodlights. There were wrecked buildings for blocks, so it wasn't just that one little spot. And the actual pile, I found this interesting in a bad way. I'd been to many building collapses in my career, but in the pile was just dust and steel. There was no furnishings, no carpet, no computers. It was that much of a disaster. Around the buildings was dust and paper. If you see the videos, and a lot of you have watched it, little specks in the air look like confetti. The buildings literally just spit out paper. So that was what centered on my mind. And I walked past one piece of paper sitting on the ground, and I realized it had blown off one of the buildings. All in Lower Manhattan, people would tape up on the buildings pictures of their loved ones and family members. And it said Angela Perez, a picture of her, age 35. She worked at Cantor Fitzgerald on the 102nd floor. Has anyone seen her? Please call her family. She did not survive. So the point is, there were names. And here's an interesting sidelight of the World Trade Center attack. Roughly 500,000 people were evacuated out of Lower Manhattan on boats. The Coast Guard got on their Marine Channel and said every boat in New Jersey and New York come to Lower Manhattan, because people were trapped. They couldn't get north. They were covered in dust. They were injured. There were mass casualty patients in Newark and in Connecticut and wherever there was a train station. So this was a large event that was spread out. And this evacuation, the media just missed it. But it was been compared with the Dunkirk evacuation that happened in World War II. I would add that it wasn't just, of course, the World Trade Center. We lost military personnel at the Pentagon attack. We lost an aircraft in Spotsville, Pennsylvania. We had, of course, 2 towers that went down. And I would add that I think the figure's 125 people at the Pentagon. Now, our mission, hopefully, was to treat anybody, any survivors, firefighters, law enforcement, didn't matter, that came out of the attack, that were rescued by the firefighters and the cops working the pile. Never happened. We kept waiting. We kept hoping for a void. In fact, the Champlain Towers collapse reminded me, it took me right back to the World Trade Center again, where they kept hoping for people, and it didn't happen. And I want to give you some names too, that because these were people, and you hear the numbers, but some names I knew. I had been working on a project in Boston with New York City Battalion Chief Jack Fanning. He didn't survive. Joseph Angelini Sr. and Joseph Angelini Jr., both of them New York City firefighters, father and son, were both killed in the attack. And 2 brothers. They were the sons of a retired New York City fire captain. One brother was in law enforcement, New York cop. The other brother was a firefighter. It was John and Joey Bigliano. Also, you may have heard Father Michael Judge. This hit everyone very hard because within a few minutes after the attack, Father Judge was the chaplain of the New York City Fire Department. He responded on the scene, and he was giving last rites just outside the building, and a body fell from the top of the Trade Center and killed him. So he died on the scene. And it's just one story after another. And I would add, by the way, what hit my family a little bit was the aircraft accidents as well, because my wife Lynn, who is here tonight, was a retired she still is, a retired Eastern Airlines flight attendant, and she had been following this with her fellow flight attendants. And so 25 flight attendants, 8 pilots were also lost with the airline crew. Now, I want to give you some highlights too. This wasn't necessary, well, it was a horrible tragedy. But one of the highlights, and several of them, I've never seen more flags flying in any city in the country than in New York. It was wall-to-wall flags, and everybody chipped in. I'm embarrassed to tell you that I gained weight on this attack because the top New York restaurants, these buildings were bombed out and trashed, but they brought food down and served. And one morning we're going through the breakfast line, and I got served breakfast by Tim Robbins, who played in the Shawshank Redemption in Top Gun. Another time we were getting ready to go on a night shift, and we're up on 55th Street and 7th Avenue, and Bill Murray walks up, and he's talking to us. And I'm thinking, am I really standing on a sidewalk talking to Bill Murray? These people really boosted us up. And one last thing, we were visiting a firehouse. You know, being firefighters, when we were off, we went to different firehouses, and this big Suburban drives up, and it's the cast from The Sopranos. And they were just, and they looked as tough and real as they did in the show. And they were going to firehouses, and it was just an amazing thing. Now, there was a couple of funny things that happened. And for you law enforcement officers, this is a classic New York cop story. We're driving with some equipment on what they call a John Deere Gator, 4-wheeler, and the guy driving the Gator turns too wide and takes the side off a New York police car, including knocking the window down, the side mirror down, and we stop. And the cop gets out, they're both of them in the front seat. He gets out, slowly walks toward me, and I'm getting an eyeball roll about every 3 seconds. We get to where he's talking to me, and he says, you know, we've got procedures here. And you like my Miami accent? And there's only one way to come back with that. And I said, you're right, we're the biggest idiots on the planet because we just hit a police car with 2 cops in it. And he looks at me and he says, that's right, and just turns and walks away. No paper, no nothing, and we got out of that one. So it wasn't totally negative. And it was kind of an emotional story when we had to leave. We were there 17 days. And every time we went down to the pile from Midtown, our bus went through an area where there must have been 100 people on the street. They couldn't go any further south. They couldn't get through the security checkpoints, but they waved flags, they cheered us on. So our last trip, we're leaving after a day shift. We're gonna fly out the next morning, and somebody said, stop the bus. We've never met these people. We got off the bus, and they were no shaking hands, no saying anything. We just started hugging each other. And frankly, I lost it. And I was a little embarrassed, and I looked around and realized the whole team lost it. And everybody in the group lost it. So we finished standing on a street corner with 100 people crying. And I'll take that with me forever. It was just the way that we could bounce back. Now, in my closing, what does all this mean to us? I want to pull it together because look around you for a second. Look at the lights, look at the uniforms. I hope you realize for the last hour or so that we've been here, they're taking calls. Some of them can't be here right this minute. They can't stop. So they're there all the time. And when the chiefs were speaking, I thought of something about their business model. Not a word that you guys would use, but I'll use it. Their business model is they can take $3 million, $4 million worth of equipment, handfuls of law enforcement officers, firefighters, and medics from Okaloosa EMS. Hello, Daryl, good to see you. And they put them 5 minutes notice, 7 days a week, including Christmas, at your front door, regardless of your ability to pay. That's a business model. I would add that at this very moment, there are teams from here that are at the New Orleans and other areas of Louisiana. Teams from throughout Florida went to the Champlain Towers collapse in Miami. So that's the way we work. That's the way the badges and the uniforms and DOD work, and they're here for you. So I just wanted to pull this together and tell you that we have a killer business model in America. And I would close by recognizing that my grandchildren, Camilla and Luke, are here. And this is why we have to get this right time and time again for America's children. Thank you.
Well done, Dr. Hank Christen, representing the team commander for the Gulf Coast Disaster Medical Assistance Team. Thank you, Hank.